Annabelle Creation is hitting theaters. Can it conjure up a good review from me and Roth? Find out right here on Screen Junkies News. I'm Dan Murrell.
And I'm Roth Cornett, and I'm a lifelong horror fan, Dan. How about you?
And I am not, yeah. But that's all right, because not that I don't like them, I just don't enjoy them. I don't like being scared, and so horror movies are a very nerve-wracking process for me.
It's funny because I have a friend who feels that way as well, and the way he describes it is like, look, if it actually achieves what it wanted to, then I'm left feeling a way I don't want to feel.
Right.
And then if it doesn't, then it's a bad movie, and I've just watched a bad movie.
I'm very much in that line, and in that line of thinking, I will say that I was miserable throughout most of Annabelle Creation, which means it did its job right.
Yeah.
Because this movie is one of the better horror movies that I've seen in a while.
Me too. And here, I am a huge fan of the genre, and I will say that most of the horror movies that come out each year are pretty terrible, right? And so
Generally.
When you get that rare gem that actually does its job, and I think that we need to restate this.
Yeah.
When we are reviewing movies and talking about movies, we're not comparing them to each other. So it's not like Annabelle versus The Revenant, you know, or something like that.
It's not, yeah, exactly.
But on the scale of, it's basically judging it against what it's trying to achieve. And a movie like this is basically putting you on a thrill ride. Does it scare you? Does it use the tools of the medium effectively? Is it well directed and well told? Is it well acted? Is it ultimately leave you a little thrilled and shaken at the end? Yes, yes, yes to all of that. Therefore, it did its job.
Yeah, it's part of the Conjuring franchise. This is
expanded universe.
This is a prequel to Annabelle, which I have not seen but did not get good reviews.
It is not good.
This is one of the rare horror sequels. Ouija, strangely. Ouija Origin of Evil came out last year and had really good reviews. The original did not have good reviews. So we're starting to see these kind of horror sequel prequels come out and have better reviews than the original movies. But it is about the doll. It's first seen in the first Conjuring movie that is very evil. And we kind of see how that doll came to be.
Yes, this is the origins of a creepy doll. And look, there are a few things. This thing is hitting every trope of horror, right?
Oh, for sure.
Like, it's got creepy little girls, it's got a ghost, it's got demons, it's got the scary doll, it's got strange, injured and demented adults. It's like a woman lurking that in the nuns. It's got it all, man. And it's really well directed. This is David Sandberg directed this. He did Lights Out. He's set to do Shazam, which will be an interesting turn for him. And the thing that I love about him is that it harkens back to the horror movies I loved growing up, which is not only is it legitimately scary. I mean, I screamed in the middle of this film, and it was embarrassing.
Oh, there's some effective scares because it does that thing that's kind of like, it's kind of the James Wan style. Horror kind of goes through different phases, and like in the mid-90s it was kind of teenage horror, and it was the screams and I Know What You Did Last Summer and Urban Legend, and like that was like the horror movies that were coming out. And then since The Conjuring, it's been this kind of, I call it the James Wan style because I feel like he kind of started this with The Conjuring, where the style is very serious and they're well-made films. A lot of these movies, not like The Bye-Bye Man, which is super cheap and not good, but these kind of bigger horror movies films. Conjuring 2, this movie. And the effect of the scare is there are long stretches. I mean, this movie is just unbelievably tense.
Absolutely.
Because you know that thing is jumping out at you, but they just leave you dangling on that line for so long, and it just gets silent.
I think the other thing that he does so well as a director, and that I love, is that a lot of the movies that I grew up loving were also really funny. You know, if you think back to Halloween, there are small moments, and like Michael Myers, just this, you cut to Michael Myers and he just goes, and this has a lot of those moments. So it actually really feeds the tension and release experience of a thrill ride. You're laughing, you're screaming, you're crying. And then the other thing that he does really well that I think some of the Blumhouse movies haven't totally worked for me, because sometimes what they'll do is that they'll put the monster, whatever it is, the demon, in a big wide shot and show you everything. It does a lot with a little. You're right, because he implants so many little moments in throughout the film, you're searching every frame going like, where's the ghost? Because it could be during the day. It could be any time of the day.
And it's not always where you expect it.
It's not where you
does
expect
play with
it.
the tropes, but it has a lot of the tropes. And, of course it's going to be a movie where you're like, you idiot, why are you walking into the haunted bedroom? You know that nothing can happen good
Nothing
in
good
there.
happens
but
there.
if they don't walk in the haunted bedroom, there's no movie.
And then they also have the character there going, why are you in here? I'm going to go.
Right.
And then so the person who stays, they've been given the information.
There was one trope, but I was talking about this with my girlfriend on the way home because she loves horror movies. I don't. So I suffer no fools when it comes to horror movies. If it's bad, the experience is so dreadful for me that if it's bad, like I really viciously go against it because I'm like, you put me through that for nothing. But if it's good, I appreciate it that much more because I'm like, wow, that made it worth it. And we were talking last night on the way home, and there was a trope that they didn't do, which I'm glad, and that kind of shows her like, yes, there's some things they fall into, but they also subvert some tropes because most of the characters, it's at a house that's been converted to a girls' orphanage, but they don't play with that trope of I'm the adult and I don't believe you, and you're gonna come and tell me that there's ghosts, and there's no such thing as ghosts, and 30 minutes of it is like trying to convince it. They don't do that. It's like everyone is in on this simultaneously. There's none of this thing of just like, okay, I have to wait for them to convince the adults that there's ghosts before the scene can really get going. Like, no, this thing just goes and it does not let up until the end.
Yeah, and the other thing that I really liked about it too, to your point of subverting the tropes, is it sets up certain events. Even early on, there's an inanimate object with the girls that are not the little girls, but there are teenage girls also, and it sets up something that can be ultimately very creepy and dangerous, and it plays it all out, and then it doesn't fulfill what you think its promise. But that's not a bad thing because you don't know when it's going to happen or where it's going to happen.
It makes it almost more tense.
It makes it more tense because you were unclear about who is going to win or lose in this. Who is the final girl? It's not, that's a trope in horror movies. There is no final girl, Yeah. Or is there?
Or are there more than one?
Or are there more than one? That's the great thing. You're left unknowing. So I think it's so smart. It's so well directed. It is funny. It is scary. It is an enjoyable time at the theater. This is really one of the better directed horror movies you're going to see this year.
It is. It's one of the better horror movies I've seen in a while. Is it one of the best movies of the year?
No,
it's not one of the best movies of the year.
It's not supposed to be.
Exactly. It's a horror movie. It's a really well-made horror movie, and the reviews are starting to come in as it opens tomorrow as we're taping this, and I'm seeing the review kind of a lot of the consensus kind of go down. This had some great early buzz, and it's going down, and it surprises me a little bit because there are 3 out of 4 horror movies are usually just awful.
Garbage.
And this is not just isn't bad. I think this is a really well made one. So I'm surprised to see that there's been some consensus going against it. As not a fan of horror movies, as somebody who hates the experience and is miserable throughout most horror movies, I actually like this movie. I would recommend it. I think it's worth your time.
As a fan of the genre, I maintain, and I think Dan may take up the mantle of doing the numbers on this. I maintain there is a genre bias. There's a genre bias. Horror movies are typically, I think, reviewed poor. This isn't to say that there aren't horror movies that are also beautiful classic films.
Yeah,
there are.
But
Repulsion, most of Hitchcock, The Shining, sure, there's examples. But a lot of them are just meant to be a thrilling good time at the theater. That is what this does. If you are a horror fan like I am, I highly recommend it. And I think horror fans are going to come out more than satisfied.
You're going to have a good time.
You're going to have a good time at the theater, and that's what it's asking. That's what it's set out to do. So genre bias, we'll find out in the future, but for now, go check out Annabelle if you like horror.
From a horror fan and a guy who really, really has a bad time watching horror movies but can appreciate it afterwards, we're both saying Annabelle Creation is worth your time.
I shouldn't do that. That's like going, no.
Get sued.
I take it back.
We don't want to do that.
Just
go see it.
Yeah, just go see it.
Thanks for watching our review of Annabelle Creation. We'll be back soon. So many other movies coming out as we wind down the summer and head into the fall. We'll see you next time.
Click here for more awesome Screen Junkies news and click the logo to subscribe.